Uh, Good evening. I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of Sri Lanka Association of Advancement of Science, E3 section, which deals with the computer science and information technology. Today, our main moderator is Professor Lasith Gunawardena. Professor Lasith is working at the Department of Information Technology, Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce at the Sri Javadhanpura University. And today our resource persons are Mr. Vipula Liyanarachi, the General Manager of SWAN 24/7. And other resource person is Mr. Dilan Rajapaksha, who's the Managing Director of Vital Hub Innovations Lab and the SLASCOM board member. I will hand over to Professor Lasith Gunawardena to continue the session. Over to you, Professor Lasith.
Thank you, Dr. Rasika. Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us, including our two panel resource persons for the day, Mr. Dilan Rajapaksha and Mr. Vipula Liyanarachi. So when we talk in the context of today's topic, we all know that in the case of computing-related projects, computing-related degrees, the projects that are conducted as part of the academic program, may it in your final year, may it be a group project or individual project, irrespective of the number of credits, is an important aspect in terms of how how a graduate understands the concepts, the skills that are obtained in the degree program. So it's always an important element of the undergraduate years, in that one proudly reflects back on the project that you do, the experience you gain through that process, which sometimes is questioned at interviews and as long as you grow in your career. So in this aspect, our resource persons today are quite widely experienced in terms of their industry experience, and coming from a computing background, they've grown to this up to this level. So I think they are quite the topic is quite opportune to them. But before we get to the topic, I'd like I'm sure the audience must be interested to know a bit more about our resource persons. So I'd like to give the opportunity briefly to each of our panelists today to just introduce about themselves. Maybe I'll start with Dilan, with Dilan Rajapaksha, Manager Director for Vital Hub Innovations Lab and also board member at board director at SLASCOM. Dilan, maybe you could give a small introduction about yourself, and then we'll go deep dive into the topic.
Thank you, Professor Lasith, and thank you, Dr. Rasika, for inviting us for this session and to share our knowledge and our learnings with the rest of the audience. So a very brief introduction of myself. I'm a graduate from the University of Colombo. I did my degree in computer science, and then I have worked at several organizations. I started my career as a developer, a software developer, and then gradually moved into other areas as well. I have been a project manager, and then right now I work at a company called Vital Hub, where we are a Canadian-based company who are specialized in healthcare software development. So I'm currently heading the operations of the Vital Hub of Colombo office, which consists of over 100 employees. And as Lasith said, yeah, I have been working with so many different graduates, undergraduates, interns. So I have quite a bit of experience working with them, and what I'm like all the positives and maybe even the areas which they can improve as well. And also I'm currently a visiting lecturer at University of Colombo and Open University. So then there again I have some experience working with the students. So hopefully I would be able to share some of my learnings with the rest of the audience today.
Right. Thank you, Dilan. And similarly, I'd like to invite Mr. Vipula Liyanarachi, General Manager at SWAN 24/7, to discuss, share his a little bit about himself to our audience to get to know more. Over to you, Vipula.
Right. Thanks, Lasith, and thanks again, Rasika, for the opportunity to talk here. And welcome everyone who joined today to the session. So let's see whether we can make this a very fruitful session. So I'm also a graduate from Moroto University. I came to the industry in the year 2001, end of 2001, and been in the industry, I think, more than close to 20 plus years by now. My experience I have, education side, I did my bachelor's in electronics and telecommunication engineering. And I worked as a circuit designer, very much onto electronics for about, I think, 3-4 years. And later, I started learning software by myself. And large part of my career, I worked as a person who was involved in operating system level, Windows CE, Windows Mobile, Android, like operating system level software for mobile computers. That's my background. And during this career, I learned management and slowly moved to management. And my general manager type career is actually very short. It's probably little more than 1 year. So large part of my career I spent as a technical leader and a manager small team, leading to small teams. So I have worked in multiple organizations, reporting to multiple people, world-class organization, including Motorola that you all know. I was part of Motorola for about, I think, 7 years, and Symbol Technologies, all were like US-based tech giants. Now I'm part of Swan 24/7, which is a kind of a software services and electronics and software services organization where we take any challenging project. Like that's the beauty of our organization. We don't really have any specialization per se, but we take any challenge where generally other companies really want to touch. So that's where Swan comes in. Hope I made myself clear.
Yes, thanks, Supal. That's great. So between the two of you, I think you have a vast amount of experience in different organizations, in different capacities, and your perspectives from two leading universities in the country, as alumni of two leading universities in the country, will certainly add value to our discussion. I'd like to, at the initial state itself, I'd like to welcome our participants to type any questions that they have on the chat. We will be taking maybe in-person voice opportunity for questions at the end, but I encourage you to ask questions from the beginning itself to make this more interactive. So with having said that, we'll dive into the topic right away. And when we talk of projects, as I mentioned in the original initial thoughts, projects come in different flavors or different titles, different amount of credits. But in general, as two our resource persons themselves have been involved in this track as undergraduates at a certain stage early in their career. So I'd like to my first question, maybe Dilan, I'll pose to you. What do you see as the purpose of the project in terms of in a undergraduate computing degree? What do you see as an ideal project should be, or the purpose that a project should serve? Yeah.
Yeah, Lasit, I'm like, I'll try to map this purpose along with how the industry would be benefiting from this purpose as well. I'm like, first of all, what I see is as a project, you are solving a problem. So I'm like, it's beyond our work life, our personal life. Everywhere we have to solve problems. That's how we take our life forward, right? So always solving a problem is the challenge you have, even in the work life. So I think even a project should be, you as a student, first of all, you have to identify a project and solve it. So that project can be maybe you are coming up with a product where you can solve that problem, or even internally it could be a technical problem you are solving. So it's not always, I don't think it should be a product per se. I'm like saying a functioning product, commercializing product is need not to be. Sometimes even maybe you're coming up with a framework, a new framework, which helps some other to develop develop software, right? So but always it would be really interesting if a problem is being solved, or even if a student can identify a problem of an existing product or existing service, and if they can improve. So I don't think the purpose of the project is not always be innovative and come up with something new which no one has ever done before. It's nice if you can do it, but it's sometimes you might not have such an idea. Like it's always that idea which takes you to the project, right? But even if you can see a certain limitation in the existing product, and if you can demonstrate how you can improve it, I think that is a good project idea. So the first of all, which I think the most important part is where you should be solving a problem, and then you would be using and demonstrating what you have learned. So that's the second important part. So because as a university student, the students are learning so many different things, so many different subjects and modules, etc. there, right? But like from my experience, I know like it's mostly the theoretical things you learn, and it's very rarely you get to apply them. But so the project is where you can demonstrate. You can't apply everything you learn, but certain interested areas which you would like to take your career forward, you can choose some certain areas and you can apply it. You can, and then you can demonstrate it to the others. This is what I have learned while solving a problem. So that is that I think that would be the main purpose of doing a project. And then the byproducts are, of course, if it is a teamwork, you are learning to work as a team. That is important. If you are coming into the commercial environment, that is a very needful skill which you need to have. And then maybe working for a timeline, because those are the things which sometimes we as students, we never understand the limitation of the time which is given in the practical real term world. So I think these are the main areas which we need to address by doing a good product, good project as university students.
Okay, thanks, Len. Yeah, I think you touched on some important things in terms of solving the problem, and additional benefits you mentioned about maybe the not so direct, obvious things, but then as you mentioned, the importance of the team cohesion and the timeline. Yes, that's definitely valid points. But at the same time, I'll move on to Vipula to add thoughts on this. I mean, how do you see the purpose of a project, and how its origin for an undergraduate level? What is your reflections on that?
So as you said, like it's the undergraduate project that we are talking about. So it's part of the your learning process. It's a part of the academic thing that you are going to basically give to the students. So the main purpose of the undergraduate project is actually learning. All right. So it is not really not implementing something that is useful. It may not be something that is going to be used or developed as another product, or it may not be something that we really want to push them as their career. But the purpose of the undergraduate project is learning itself. So everything that Dilan spoke about has to be focused on learning on how to find a project is one thing. Learning on how to find a project. What is the project that you really want to do? What really is interesting to you? Okay. If you really can't find something, then how do you want to talk to your academic staff and see what are the opportunities that they have inside the university? Maybe there are projects that is already halfway done that they can drive to completion. Finding a project is another learning skill, and then selecting the right tools. What are the tools that is more suitable, and then finding your team members. How do you manage time, teamwork? How to really distribute the work among your team members based on the skill set. Everything you can learn, and many things that you learn during the project you cannot really teach in the classroom. So emphasis has to be always given, as long as students are within the pyramid of the university, it has to be learning. Right. And also, like when we come across students who have done great projects, we always ask them the aspects that they have learned. What have you learned? So university is a place for learning. How much you can really absorb is the game during this time period.
Okay, thanks, Vipul. So you touched on an important, you added on this importance of considering the project as part of the learning rather than just not by just a opportunity to sort of prove your skills. Apart from that, you mentioned the valid thing is it's part of the learning, indeed, and it's often the credit given for or the value given for a project in terms of a grade is definitely a reflection that has that is evaluated. I'll start my second question. Sorry.
There's one more thing, like there are certain projects that ultimately ended up as great products. What I remember, the e-channeling, you all are familiar with, was a final year project for a student. Likewise, when you really go after your passion, some projects end up in great products, but it is not the expectation of the project. It is learning itself.
So I'll come to the output part of the project maybe a little later in our discussion. But at the same time, I'll just catch on one thing that you mentioned, Vipula. When we look at how the project initiates the idea generation, I think that's an important thing because often when it comes to undergraduate projects, there is no single solution. But depending on the situation, depending on the type of mentors, supervisors that you have, and the type of opportunities, the projects can gain motivation from different aspects. So when a student or when an academic is supporting a project, there are different ways that this can originate from in terms of how the idea can come. So I'd like to ask our panelists to give their ideas on how they think the projects can. I'm sure you have gone through different students who have, as mentors, maybe in part of your career for young interns. And in terms of the project ideas, do you see these ideas as originating from the supervisor, or can or the student, or can the industry be helpful when at the initiation itself? Dilan, would you like to start that?
Yeah, Lasit, before answering that, I have in my I'm categorizing these project or the students who are doing the projects into 3 categories generally. Right. So one is, as Vipula said, someone who has like a brilliant idea, just like e-channeling, which can end up being a commercial product at one day. Maybe at that time, even he himself might not know what he's doing. Why he might end up. Maybe he already have that idea, but the idea, the concept coming out from within himself or herself, and ultimately one day being a very successful commercial project. And then certain students would have more research type of ideas, right? So some might want to focus on doing research and being innovative or introducing new concepts or something like that. Or otherwise, even certain students would want to learn how they can be successful in the commercial world, in working, if they're working in the industry in another company. So they want to learn basic straightforward systems, how they work, how maybe like a transaction system, how things work, such as that, right? So I'm like, this all depends on the students' capacity and the capability, because I'm like, in the real world, if we take a cross section of a batch of students, like we find people with very good skills who ultimately end up with first class with high GPA, and at the same time there are like more students with a general average knowledge and skills, and then unfortunately there are a few who would even not pass the degree, right? Because like we had to face the reality. So we have a cross section of all these people, right? So as now when we are looking for these ideas and the concepts for projects, I believe we have to think of all these students. So if someone is like struggling to get through the degree and go through this, takes a research project, that would make it more difficult for him to go through the degree, right? So this is where I think the university, the supervisors and the lecturers have to help them. You have to, if they know, because they are the people who know actually who can do what. So based on that, they can suggest, they can sort of give them ideas. Okay, so this is something which should be good for you, right? Because I believe that if all students can do a research project, that would be great, right? But in the practical world, it is not possible, right? So so rather, now to answer your question as well, I think first you have to consider that what you can do, because ultimately in the practical world you have to, as people said, learn something and complete your degree. That's your ultimate target when you're in the university, right? Learn something and complete your degree and then go to the next step in your career, right? So you have to figure out a way you can, how you can do it as well. And at the same time, if you have the skills, if you have the capabilities, then you can go for all these very interesting ideas, very interesting concepts as well. So to answer your question, I'm like, first of all, the students need to think of that, what they can do, and then based on that, of course, they can get inspired from the lecturers, and even if from or the industry, like even they talk to their friends or the colleagues or the senior students who are already working, they might tell, okay, in our company we have a problem like this. So that these ideas would bring them into a nice, interesting project. Or even sometimes, even maybe if you search through the internet, you will find certain sort of problems and what the good solutions would be for that. So I don't think there's like one source for these ideas. It's like everywhere, everyday life, you will find all these problems. Probably even in the current situation where we are as a country right now, I think this is the best time for people to come up with solutions, because you have so many problems, right? So that's when you have problems and you come up with solutions. So this could end up with nice project ideas.
Yes, I think you hit the nail, I mean, on the head itself by addressing our current situation in Sri Lanka. Because as you said, yes, we have enough problems, which from a computing aspect, there are solutions. And in a way that, let's say, from the country perspective, for example, the QR code was a kind of a success when you look at this although not as a university project. Before moving on to Vipula, I'll just share a question which has been posed by Manoj Karnatna in something in relation to this. So I'll take it up at this point itself. In academy, we find some research questions addressing through projects. In contrast, there are projects which are not so research heavy, which are just more like automation projects. I mean, would you like to add anything, Dilan, on this? I mean, how do you see these projects? The school. I mean, there are different projects in terms of depth, what it covers more into research, and then there are others which are, maybe on the surface, not into.
Yeah, Lasit, again, I'm like, I think I partially answered that in the previous answer as well. Like it all depends on what you can do as well, right? I'm like, if you can do a research and come up with something new, that's great, right? But sometimes, even if you look at, as I said, like if you can look into a general day-to-day problem, and maybe it might not be always we have to think these solutions might not need to be very technical. Highly technical solutions where you use the latest state of the art technology is not needed. I'm like, if you look at from the commercial world, like most of our organizations, we don't do innovation every day, right? Like sometimes we come up with a new product and then you have to keep on maintaining and building on that product for the rest of the 5 to 10 years, right? So you need people who can identify problems within that product itself and keep on improving, right? So that is why I always think that it's good students need to learn all the new high-tech technologies. But even as straight as this question asks something, if you can automate something, so you're solving a problem. But more importantly, even if the students, I'm not saying the research should not be done, right? But certain students can choose this, which will be very, very useful in the commercial world. That skills what they learn would be very useful, because I know from my experience, when we are interviewing students or the interns, we always ask of the projects they have done, because that is the only differentiator for them, because otherwise there's nothing much to ask from them during the interviews, right? Because all students learn the same subjects, only the project is different. So when you ask of the project which they have done, they straight away start answering, okay, I have used PHP and MySQL. So even there itself, I feel that they are failing, because when you ask the problem, they have to tell this is the problem, and then the project say they have to say this is the problem, this is the answer we have done. So start with that, and then start explaining why you have done this, why you have chosen this solution, and maybe how you can improve the product. So these are the skills which will help them to prosper in the career, right? So I don't have a differentiator here by saying whether it should be research or not. Either is fine. It all depends on your capability as a student, on what you can do.
Okay, I'd like to extend the same question to Vipula, because I'm sure he has maybe complementing views on this. So Vipula, in terms of the question, what I'm referring to is the original question posed, Ziran, was on the project idea origination, and plus the question from the audience was in terms of whether research question, addressing research questions to projects, or contrasting with more surface level automation like projects. How would you value this, or how do you think the industry sees this?
So I think Dylan covered large part of it. I will basically summarize what I really want to see. With the type of the project, whether it is academic project, whether it is an automation project, it really boils down to what that particular student is going to be when he comes out. Okay, so what from the university side, what we can really do is put some structure around it, so that we can facilitate all these types of requirements. Like if there's a person who really wants to do a technically or simple thing, but that has a heavy weight, like a very useful thing, but it is going to be technically very simple. So then the mentoring process and everything is going to be very different than an academic or basically research type of program. So we need to have that supporting structure inside the university. If somebody wants to develop something, build something, and that type of project, you need to make sure that that particular student completes it. Like, because if it is a small value addition, the complexity comes in the complete development cycle. He has to learn how to develop it, document it, and then management part of it, like how to manage the source code, where to put it, and all the stuff he has to learn during the project. Though if it is not a technically heavy thing, but if it is a research project, you need to put a research type of academic mentor who can really look into the depth of that program. And those are the people who might come back to the university as lecturers. So put some structure behind it, try to figure out what type of student or student group that is coming in with this idea, and support it in the way that that particular project or that student team is successful. And for all these type of projects, whether it be research projects, whether it is automation or simple ideas that can turn out to be a product, you can definitely request support from industry. It doesn't really have to be completely funded and guided by the academia. The research projects, probably academics can do a better job than the industry. But if you take my company, we have people who have PhDs in the organization. So we can do some work on academically heavy parts as well. But product type of thing, definitely get the right mentorship, give the right guidance, and create an evaluation process so that you can evaluate and give a good score for all of these types, not just academically heavy types or just product types. So like, let's give that freedom for the students to come and pick and success. Because my age, like when we were doing projects, it was very difficult to get approval for a project that we proposed. It was always pushed. There was a set of projects that was like proposed from the academic team. We had to really go through. My project actually is something that I proposed. It was tough for me to find team members, but I managed somehow find. And getting the approval to do it is again, it was tough. We had to go through so many hurdles to get that approved as a final year project. So get these hurdles out. I'm not very sure whether this is true right now, because this is like 20 plus years back. Maybe the situation is very different right now, because our age people are now in the academic high position. So the situation might have changed. But if there's any resistance for a person, a student to come up with his own idea, whether it is simple or automation type of, let's take this resistance out and make sure that they deliver something tangible, and do the evaluation also accordingly. And if you want support for this evaluation process also from the industry, definitely we can help.
Yeah, Lasit, I need to add, like, yeah, as you said, it's all depends on what you want, what your purpose of doing the project, right? If you're actually doing a project as a research, then it's good. But if you are doing the project to showcase what you can do, then it's different, right? So that's what we need to understand, because and like from the industry perspective, purely from the industry perspective, we need people who can join our companies and take forward the work we do, right? So then what we are looking for is someone who can demonstrate that through the project they have done. So in that case, a research project might not help that student to showcase that what they need to serve in a commercial way. So as people say, that research project might help him to go beyond in research and academic career, right? So there's actually nothing right or wrong, but it all depends on your purpose, where you want to end up yourself with.
Yes. So just I'll pose the question starting from what people have mentioned. Thanks, Dylan. Mentioned. I think there was a thought, for example, in terms of the mentoring of process. So my question, when you look at, as both of you have, gone through this process sometime, as people mentioned, his idea came from his own idea. So people are like, I'll start off with you. So in terms of now the current, maybe compared with 20 years ago, I feel, there is a possibility that the academic supervisor who's an faculty member within, if the is a full-time faculty member, perhaps there is a possibility that he or she may not be very much up to date in terms of like implementation technologies, right? Because at this stage in Sri Lanka, maybe there is in reality speaks terms, the academia does not engage as part of their regular work. They don't engage with industry. Of course, there are research collaborations and things like that. So in terms of how industry can help in projects now, do you think that industry mentoring and or supporting is something, depending on the type of the project, is something the industry would look in as valuable for them itself?
Yes. So from industry perspective, there are multiple advantages that we get. Okay. We are trying to attract, industry is trying to attract good talent and build good talent, right? Not just attract. So if we really look at how it really works is, if I'm an industrialist, if I really expect universities to generate the good talent, and then we are just there to absorb, I think that is, as a country or as an industrialist, it's the wrong thing. We have to collaborate. We have to make sure that we generate the right talent. Okay, so industry collaboration always benefits to create this right talent, and also for us to identify the right person. So if I am involved in project evaluation, in that project team, if I see a particular person who really has a talent or the skill set that I need in my organization, I even don't need to go through like this interviewing process and all. I can immediately absorb. So that is one advantage that we get. And even today we do large number of in my company, we encourage and we do collaborate with universities for undergraduate projects whenever possible.
That is like in terms of like a supportive supervisor, or like an external supervisor in that caliber?
Yes, we do.
All right. So if one were to approach, like let's say your organization, they would be willing, depending on the case, of course, and situation, but as a policy, you support, supporting projects in that way.
Yes. And also if you need like an industry expert to come into the university, talk to all the students on how you want to really initiate a project and all those things we can do.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Vipula. Again, I'll remind our participants, we would like, if you have any questions, please put on the chat. We had a number of questions, one question I've already addressed. But in the meantime, if you have any other question or to add thoughts, we would welcome you to maybe raise your hand, and we will take up the question. It's welcome. I'll move on to Dilan for the next question. So I think there was the thought of, in terms of projects, what we find in academic programs today is that, as in the opening thoughts you mentioned, one of the things that a project is about is to measure how the student has, it's a learning, as Vipula mentioned, and as Dilan mentioned, it's an opportunity for the student to exhibit what they have learned and put them in practice. Dilan, my question is to you. So in terms of how the projects are evaluated, now you have gone through different interns who have come through. Do you see like a correlation between good project grades and outstanding talent out there? Or do you have any opinions on how projects are evaluated versus how they should be? If I ask simply, an extension of that, for example, there can be projects where a student is expected to, as part of the project, to come up with a design, and maybe, for example, in the design aspect, databases should be involved and so on. And do you think that level of detail is important versus what the product ends up in terms of a solution? Dilan?
No. In my opinion, Lasit, it is not necessary. I mean, because you are not trying to have a commercialized product, like full featured commercialized project or product, right? It is using what you are learned in a limited time frame, right? So in that limited time frame, if you try to do everything from scratch to a final product with databases, everything, you might not have enough time to do something serious. So rather, what I would like to see is, even conceptually they can come up with, even I'm going to the other extreme. Even if you can show a nice design, I know the university might not accept that as a product, but what I'm saying is, even if the design that is valuable, right? Like you have a problem and you come up with a technical design, so that is good. That is, you are showcasing how you can solve this problem. It is not that you need to have a running product where people can play with this and come up with the output, right? But if you can conceptually show it and explain it, because that shows your thinking. Because industry needs people who can work with our day-to-day problems in our systems, right? So they need whatever the technical skills they are lacking, we can teach them. But that conceptual knowledge, or the basics, the foundation, fundamental knowledge, that's what they are getting from the university. And we are not expecting them to start coding from the first day onwards, right? Because we are ready to teach them the technology, but we need students who can absorb these things quickly and be productive after a while. So we are not expecting a full running product. So rather, you take a small part of the product and you do it right, and then you can always say, okay, this is all I have done within the time frame, but these are the improvements I can do. That is also good, right? So because they can show, okay, this is all I had to, this is all the time I had to do this, but these are the improvements which I suggest. And if this is to be commercialized, we can do it this way. So this is the model which I can use to commercialize this. So likewise, the rest they can do in the presentation. So I think I have answered your question, right?
Yes.
It need not to be a full product. So part is good enough.
Okay, would you agree with that, or do you have an alternate view? Because I think this is depends on the type of, different universities have different schemes of how they evaluate it. But this is often a dilemma in terms of the extent of documentation that the project is part of in terms of evaluation versus really whether that needs to be done. So do you have an alternate view, or how do you?
Yeah, kind of agree. Now, my point is actually our scope is information technology, IT, correct? So when it comes to IT, not all the students who are coming out from university start coding. In this product management lifecycle, there are so many steps, starting from understanding the customer requirements, business analysis, right, and explaining what we have designed to a person. There are so many stages that you have to go through when you come up with a final product which is usable by the customers. So if there's a student who is really excelled in this business analysis type, there has to be a way that the university can really evaluate that person's skills in the way that he has, right? Because at the school, if you take the junior school up to grade 10, we are trying to basically standardize the students. We want to standardize what they know. From O levels to A levels, we let them specialize, right? But it is again within a certain framework. When it comes to university, we have to take that framework away. You should let the students to be what they are and let them showcase what they can really do. So if you have a particular person who is really a good business analyst, now we are basically, if you say that his project is not good, if the university disqualifies it, then we are basically crashing the very good business analyst. And we are not letting him coming out. So when you go up in the ladder of this education, now when you go to a PhD, I think you are way like a liberal, because the knowledge that you are trying to generate doesn't exist. Likewise, we have to take out the barriers that we have in the framework so that the students can excel in what they truly are. But there will be students who will be struggling. Like not all the students are innovative. There may be students who need academic help. Then there may be projects where the academic team members can do a little bit of hand-holding and create a programmer or whatever you think that is suitable. But there are students who are not really ready to take that judgment. They want to do it by themselves. So let them do it.
Right. My next question, I'll start from here again itself. It's kind of an extension of this. So now today, if you look at most academic institutions, like there is variation in terms of the projects, but there is at certain cases, there is an opportunity for students to showcase their projects in competitions. So there are a number of local competitions. There are international competitions out there. In fact, I mean, there are many hackathons out there where you can, solve problems. But irrespective of those hackathon likes, there are cases where you can just directly propose, or you can directly exhibit your project if it's correct in terms of the timeline of that competition. Do you think this, drive to competitions, is that something healthy and helpful for the project and for the student's career, or do you see them as opposite? As of now, as you mentioned, there was the creativity aspect. Do you think that is sufficient to identify creativity?
Yes, so it definitely helps. Like there are students who really want to go and see how their ideas and how their thinking process is evaluated against something. So there are students who want to really go and compete. For those students, let them go and compete. So it's not for everyone. Universities shouldn't really target going for competitions, but if there are students who really want to go and compete and see, get their face out in those competitions, I think it has to be encouraged. And also, definitely, if there's industry participation needed, universities definitely can reach out to us.
Okay, Dilan, do you have any view on this? I think you've been also involved in.
The competitions are good. Like that because you are competing with, maybe like if you are going for international competitions, like you are competing with people from the next level, right? Like you are going beyond the university. So which is good. Like you are being exposed to the international standards, and you are recognizing international standards as well, right? But maybe but you might need to differentiate. Like if you want to target, if you want to do that, you do it. But don't mix that with the university project, because sometimes the university project, the purpose would be different, right? Because there you might need, it depends on the competition. Certain competitions might ask you to do a running product, right? Not the concepts are not good enough. Maybe like a half done product is not good enough, right? So there you might need to have a like nice interface. Everything is expected in a competition. Different competitions would have different rules, of course, right? But so that's the thing. So sometimes you might, if you target only that, then you might miss the objective of your university project. So as long as you are not being disturbed with that, then it's fine. These competitions are really good. It's a good exposure for the students.
So another question I'll extend from this. So people come up with, especially which I've seen in competitions, like there are outstanding projects which are identify good grades, which good grades come up from their like first class students have great projects. And then there are projects which are outstanding local and international achievers. But some of these projects are just limited to that. In other words, they may not contribute national. I mean, there are many instances. I think Vipula mentioned an example of the opposite, where there were projects which went up and spun off into a successful venture. But from a national perspective, do you think is there any way? How do you think projects can help, or what needs to be done from an academic perspective to encourage these projects to not just be projects in a final year thesis, and to go beyond that and take it to the next level as a spin-off for a company, or sell your technology to a different company? How can the industry help?
Yeah, I think that's where the industry and the of course the lecturers, the university staff, and the industry can help, because I'm like, the student at that age might not know that they have created something brilliant, right? For them, it's only a university project, and they got marks, and that's it. So basically, that's what happens for the most of the projects, because their immediate goal is achieved, and they don't think beyond that, and then they might go and work somewhere, and their project is forgotten, right? But of course, if someone can tell them, actually, this is a great idea, you should take it forward. Maybe you should start your own company with this idea. Then they might be more successful in that, right? So probably, I don't think, sometimes some students are capable enough to understand that, but sometimes if the industry can evaluate them and tell them, okay, this is brilliant, but if you can improve on these areas, and if you can commercialize this, then you might end up with having another Google type of a new concept, right? So that's definitely, and Lasith, that's where probably the competitions would also help, right? Because in the competitions you get exposed, right? So if someone sees this and encourages them to go beyond that, that's definitely more useful. Yeah, so I think industry, as industry, we can do that, because we have that experience, right? Because we as an industry together have seen all these startups being successful and some being failed. So with all this experience, definitely students can get something. But if that is, but we have to have a platform where they can showcase to the rest of the world, right? Like if it is only done in the university level, and then no one else knows about it. So probably that's where we are lacking, right? How you can take it out to the rest of the world.
Okay, we have one question from Dr. Rasika, but before moving to that, I'll just quickly move to Vipula on his thoughts on how you see projects going beyond just a final year project. What can the industry? Anything your thoughts?
Yeah. So and just an extension to what Rizwan says, for the challenge for the industry right now is to know what is really happening inside the universities, because we never get exposed, right? So this industry collaboration, if there's any need, because universities, of course, can be the supporter in other countries. If you really see a student generating a brilliant idea, that idea generally is owned by the university itself at that point. Okay, so the universities have a tendency to capitalize on those intellectual property that students generate. So if the universities can really venture into this and make some money out of it, that's going to be a way that universities can support. And if these things can be shown out, because I have been into some of these project exhibits, Peradeniya University, probably 2-3 years back before Corona comes in, they did a project exhibition in Colombo. Right, so they invited the industry guests and all. We went there. We saw what they have done, and if there was something that I was interested, I might have definitely talked to that student group. At least I will try to absorb few students. Okay, if this guy can do this project, this is a person that I want to have in my organization. So it doesn't really happen right now. And there were certain things that was done through IESL type of organizations. There are so many organizations. We have Sri Lanka Inventors Commission. We have I know there are so many government organizations who are into this business. They are doing certain competitions as well. If the universities can actively participate, those are the places where we get to know, right? And so those are things that you can do. Otherwise, this will basically, no one would recognize the value of what these students are generating. In countries like US, you look at Google and Facebook, those two all are coming from the head of a university student, right? Some they complete their degree. In Facebook case, I think he dropped the university at early stage, and likewise. So it may not really happen from the university itself. If the student is unable to identify, I think it's something that the universities can do. I think if you really look at it, if universities can really venture into the students' ideas and try to build a patent portfolio for something under that university, it is going to be a value addition for university as well as the students.
Yes, I think you touched an important aspect, that is the universities have a responsibility to market any IP gained out of this and take it to the industry and sell it to the industry or allow to collaborate. So that's something academia, including myself, we have to work on. But at the same time, I feel there was the students, there is a tendency, for example, for students to be more motivated for a job rather than carrying the idea. We'll quickly move to a question, and we have Dr. Rasika Dayaratna who's waiting. Rasika, over to you.
Thank you.
You have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lasit. So I have a small suggestion of clarifications. So I have not seen many open source projects and contribution to the open source projects. So for example, there is a project and then we can fine tune it or cater to a different market, and we never use that open source concept and in Sri Lanka. So do you think it's a good idea to encourage the students to contribute to the open source projects, and probably they can extend it or expand it or customize to a particular industry or segment? So what do you think about that?
Dylan, I'll let you answer first.
Yeah, so I think definitely that's good. We should encourage them, because one thing is you are working on something which is already there, right? You are using an open source framework, existing product, you are trying to modify it, you are trying to improve it, right? So this is what exactly most of us are doing in our organizations, right? We have our products being done, and then we keep on improving, keep on fixing the problems it has, right? So that is a skill they are learning also with these open source projects as well. And then again, when you're working with the communities, the open source communities, there's a vast knowledge there, right? It's you are working with a huge knowledge base. You get help from all these people. They can share with their learnings. So it opens up to a huge world. So definitely it's something, because going back to what I said earlier. As long as you are learning something, then it's fine. Whether it is open source or closed code, it doesn't matter. But this is a great opportunity for them to learn from others as well, doing open source. So I'm very much in favor of students doing that.
So I would put into a question. I would ask the academia, you guys are here right now, how much emphasis that you have in your academic and university environment for open source tools. If you go to a lab, how many machines really run Linux? How many machines really run other open source tools, like for image processing? How many machines really run GIMP instead of Photoshop? Likewise, I will put it back to you, how much emphasis you really do for the learning aspect of it, because now when you take Photoshop, it is created, it is built so that a person with very less knowledge can quickly learn and start doing it. So that's how it is, right? Any Google tool, if you look at, have you ever seen any documentation to use Google tools? No, right? They are very intuitive. They have designed it in a way so that idiots can use. But university is not a place where idiots live, right? It is for the brilliant people. So my suggestion, starting from schools, if you guys can push, let the students learn the open source tools. We are really, in Sri Lanka, it's really pathetic because we have not really put that thought forward. Even at schools, I have seen the students are learning commercial tools, and even their parents really cannot afford. And it's pushing these people to use pirate software, which is stealing, right? And we are teaching our students to steal from the day one, which is really wrong. So if you look at my home, I have taught my kids, they use Linux. It's not that I cannot afford a commercial version. I ask them to use Linux. Linux, when you start using it, it's very intuitive. It's really fun. And if you really want to do a change, you have access to everything. And then they get exposed to the community. The open source community is very nice. The best people are there. Whenever you ask a question, like probably within 2 hours, you get an answer. There are brilliant people who are really brilliant here. And we have not really exposed or explored the vast knowledge that is residing within this open source community. I am a fan of open source tools. I use GIMP, I use Blender, one of my favorite tools. While I have all these CAD tools and all the stuff, that is fun. And even while we were in Motorola, we had all the fancy tools, Creo, AutoCAD, everything was at our disposal. But I was really fascinated about how the open source tools were built, because these are coming from free thinkers, not driven by corporate thought process, not for make money. This is to learn. So universities, I think it is the university's responsibility, push the students to learn from the open source tools where the purpose of building the open source tools are to learn. So get there, when you learn the open source tools, adapting to a commercial version is very easy. If you know GIMP, it's like probably a weekend job for you to go and master Photoshop.
People,
Right.
it's like once you learn how to drive a car, manual car, then auto car is much easier, right? That's the analogy, yeah.
So push for that. University has to do it. When it comes to industry, now the previous company I used to work, Zebra, it is predominantly running on Linux because we do Android. So large part of our development team is running on Linux. But when I come to my new company, it's largely based on Windows because we are doing open source software. If somebody want to move from Linux to Windows, it's very easy, but not the other way. So from university side, I think it has to be emphasized and pushed. Students has to be pushed to learn open source, and whenever they need a change, you have to encourage them to go and look at the code and do the change and contribute it back to the community. So that is the beauty of open source, right? If you do something great, you have to contribute it.
Right. Thank you, Vipula. I think that is a very valid point. Pointing the finger at academia and to real check our own practice of being connected with open source. I'll move on to another question. Opportunity for a question. We have Taraka who's raising his hand. Taraka, over to you for your question.
Okay, thank you. I have a question on scope. Now, when students do projects, we generally have some time limits, let's say 15 weeks, and then for each week, 2 hours or 3 hours, and even they have to work beyond those allocated hours. Now, when they do the project, some projects may have large number of functionalities that may be trivial, and some projects may be having some unique features. I mean, not available, not really generally obvious ones. When you evaluate projects, student projects that are done in the university, how do you measure whether the that particular project has enough depth and breadth in terms of the scope?
I'll add one question. I'll add to another point to that. Based on our previous discussion, there are situations where open source components are part of projects, and then perhaps if the project functionality could be looking great, but it may not be also the students' contribution themselves. Maybe I'll add that to and pose to our panelists, Dilan, Vipula.
Yeah, I'll start with your point, Lasit. I'm like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? If it is there, you'd rather use it and do something on top of that, right? Because like if the functionality is already, if someone has already an API or a framework which helps you to do it, you can use it. Because like, why do you want to? Actually, that's a very good point, Lasit, because I recently came across a student who said that in their university, they were opposing for them to use the frameworks. Like they were expected to do everything from the scratch. So I'm not in favor of that. I'm like, okay, you do something from the scratch and you learn something, right? But then again, like if you going to go beyond that, I'm like, why? There's nothing wrong with using a framework, right? Because that's the concept. Because like he was in the mindset that using a framework is a bad thing. That's the idea the university has given to them. You should not use framework. No, it is not, right? Like framework, the wheel is there. So you start, rather than reinventing it, start using the wheel, right? But if you know what is inside, then it's good for you, rather than it's being a black box, right? So there's nothing wrong with reusing what is already there. And then to answer Taraka's question, the depth is more important than the breadth, right? If the same functionality is there for different, let's take say the same. I'm just taking like a very silly example here. Like if you are doing the save function is there in 5 streams, you don't need to do all 5 to make it a complete system. So rather you do one, and then you can say, okay, this is how it is done, and then go to more depth and show something else in your project, because we are not expecting a completed project. So rather a more depth in the project would be more beneficial for the student as well. So don't have that mindset where we always need a fully functioning system. It is not necessary. If it's nice, if you can have a complete system, it's really nice. But the challenge is the time frame, right? With the time frame, there's very little you can do. So you can have an agile approach. So the first, you can basically say I've done on the first version. The first version has limited functionality. So the second version, this is what I can do.
Okay, Vipula, would you like to add?
And again, it's a very broad area that we want to touch. Like when we were recruiting, I have done it for different teams and different organizations. For fresh graduates, we do really analyze what they have done. Okay, and we have been very careful on that. Like we have looked at the project that they have done, and when you are selecting the interview panel, we pick people who really know something about the project that they have done. We really want to ask cross questions on the project they have done to see whether this particular student who is coming out from the university has done the work that they have declared in their CV. So we really go into the details of the projects, right? So for some teams, I was managing one team for Motorola, which was like a very funded team for innovation. In those cases, we were looking for people who really has gone into the depth and know the framework, know the basics. So if somebody has done solved some sort of a physics problem using some computer mathematical or some algorithm, that person would stand a better chance getting selected rather than a person who has implemented a comprehensive ERP system using a framework. So those particular use cases, even the questions that we give to those students, generally we pick the questions from their A levels. We give them questions in like the Boyle's equations and all the mathematical and scientific and physics stuff. We ask Newton's equation and all the stuff. We see whether these people remember the fundamentals, because when you are in an innovation organization, your programming skills are not that needed. It's basically your problem solving skills, or at least problem creation skills. Like many things that we have done, if you look at Google and Facebook, those companies, they didn't really solve an existing problem. They basically created a problem. Okay, there was no requirement for Facebook when Facebook was created. He looked at some sort of a inbuilt weak point of human beings, and he exploited it to be a huge business, right? So likewise, we need people to think through. We need hacking mindset in these if they are really working on an innovative program. So in those cases, we look for people, students who are good at basics. But if you are really hiring for a ongoing project, which is using a certain frameworks, there's a higher chance a person who has done a comprehensive ERP solution, because he has experience on handling the tools, to get selected. So universities shouldn't really produce one type of these students. They have to produce all the type of these students. If a particular student is really willing to learn the basics and go into deep and solve a difficult problem with a complex algorithm with using a C++ code base, I think that person has a different job than the person who is trying to develop a good business solution like what I talk, like e-channeling, because it's not a e-channeling, implementing it is not a challenge. That business case is a challenge. So we need all these students, right? So universities really shouldn't create any barriers for them to come out. I always tell, like, in the schools, the fundamental mistake that we do is we really deny education to the best people. The best people really don't want to sit down in a seat and learn. They have their own way of learning. They will be very rebellious. And what we do at school is we kick them out at the very first stage. They come into other industries. What I see is, if you take large part of this civil community and all, they are coming from these kicked out students, and they are brilliant in their own way. But our education system has denied education to them just because they were not willing to sit and learn. So we should really do that mistake at university level. Okay, so take out the barriers, let them be what they are, and each of them with given the right skill set has a nice place in the industry. So the question that I think Rasika asked, what is the depth that we really expect? We don't really go and check the depth of a particular project, but what we really see is what that particular student has learned out of it. Okay, whether they have really done it, whether they have done what they have said, how honest they are about the things that they have written in their CV. So those things we really evaluate. If somebody says, we really find out who did the coding, who did the designing part. There are students who have like been in the back bench doing nothing, but supporting the teams, maybe making tea and all. So we can definitely identify. It's very easy to identify during an interview, and we do that. So project depth, it's up to you. The university standard can be maintained by deciding how depth do you want. And if we have a project which is very wide, but the depth is less, I think it also has to be given a fair chance to be implemented and evaluated fairly and equally.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Tarak, I wonder whether you got the necessary clarity. Is there any extension? Dr. Tarak, I was the, I think the, yeah.
Yes. So now there's another question now. When you, what I have seen is that the students, when they do the projects, they do not really understand the importance of these explorative skills like business analysis, which is giving them some sort of analytical thinking, and they just start thinking about some sort of product like auction system or whatever it is, but they are not really. And then they even if I ask them to write down think about user goals and use cases, but they write and then they just forget about them and start coding, right? And do you have any kind of suggestion to promote them more analytical thinking? I mean, like business analysis, importance of that, because from there you tend to think about unique features. You think about how deep you can go, what kind of innovative kind of features that you can invent and develop as develop as a unique kind of system. Now, do you have any suggestion to motivate these students to think more, think the importance of
Yeah.
this analytical skills, business analysis, and so on?
Yes, so my question is, why can't we include it into the academic course?
Let's say now in our course, I'm actually from Ruhuna University. We have I teach systems analysis and design as well as object-oriented systems development. But even if they learn, they do learn those course units in their first year. But even if they do learn them, the problem is that they do not understand that these the project is actually about about putting what they have learned into perspective and trying to solve the problems by looking it from a different perspective. But they just see it as a system development project, and then they think about something like auction systems, and then come up with those kind of things. Then I ask actually what kind of problems that you see in the existing systems that are there, but then I mean, it's hard for them to answer those kind of questions. So the course units are there, and we are trying to guide them to think about the importance by putting what they have learned into perspective. The problem is actually coming from from our schooling system, that the students are not trained to use their brains. They are not really trying to they are actually trying to memorize the things and then just apply them without really thinking them in a deeper way. So that's the problem.
Yeah, actually that feedback, I think it's a very good feedback that I got from you. I was like feeling the same thing. This feedback actually be given to the filtering criteria, like, because we get university students, we get a filtered set of students, right? The filtering criteria is absolutely wrong. I fully agree with you. That feedback has to be given little bit one level down to our schooling, the primary and secondary schooling thing, and at the university level. If there's anything that we can do, like by coming to the university and doing like visiting lectures and talking to students on how important it is, everything, it's basically a call. You just have to make that call and ask whether somebody from the industry come and talk to the students. And I have done it myself multiple times, and I think Dylan has done it more than me. He has been this business for a longer time period than me. So we used to do that, and we can definitely do. And also from academic perspective, teaching it's kind of an art. So if there are things that are more important in their career, those subjects you really can't make it a module and finish it off. Now, what we have seen is when the semester system came in, the skill set of the students we are getting out from the university, it changed. Okay, again, this I felt because I was running an innovative type of an organization inside Motorola. where we generated patents and all stuff. And I myself have at the moment about 3 patents in the US patent office. So it was a very different organization that we ran. We wanted people to think outside the box, right? What I really felt is students who are coming out from the traditional method where you have to study a full entire year and memorize the content of that entire year and put it into a paper. Their brain capacity and analytical capacity is way better than the students who are coming from semester, because they learn something, they complete that module and they forget it, right? So they don't really have a mechanism to carry a huge load in their brains because it's trained in a different way. But these students are coming into a different world than we came in, because in our world, for us to learn when we were coming out, the only way was to refer a book. Internet existed, but the content that was in the internet was very limited. Now, the students who are coming right now out is different, because whatever they need to know, they just can figure it out. Few clicks in on the phone, they can get the basic, but how far they can absorb that into their head and analyze depends on the capacity that you have built inside your brain. Okay, so we are seeing that difference. People who are coming from the study system were in this innovative and thinking out of the box business. They were better than students who are coming from the semester system. But on the other hand, on dynamic environments like using different technologies, getting the code right done, in those skills, we didn't really see any major difference from these two students. So it's my personal experience. What I really want to really emphasize is, if you really want to make something into their head as an important thing, like crossing the road from the yellow line, right? We never remind that in our schools. It is taught probably in grade 1, not in grade 2, not in grade 3. Now, if you really want to put that as a practice to students' heads, we have to keep on reminding it in every grade, follow the road rules. That's how we create a disciplined society. So likewise, if the analytical skills are important, that has to be part of each and every module. You can't teach it in one module and just forget about it. Okay, I think this problem has to be addressed at the academic level itself. And whatever support you need from guidance perspective, from execution perspective, it's a phone call. I think we should be able to help.
Okay, I think I'll add, you can go ahead. Yes, sorry.
No, I mean, like, yeah, because I think Taraka said the answer for the whole problem is as well, like it's our teaching or the school system, right? Where we are very much exam oriented rather than learning things. Because I have 2 kids who are schooling, and I can see what they're learning. I mean, like sometimes it's like just mainly they just have to pass the exam only. That's what the whole thing is. It's not that they are not worried about learning anything, and that's what they are being encouraged at the school as well. So it's something we have to start from the school level, but at least from now, since our topic is on the university level, probably I think university system is much more independent and much more knowledge oriented than the school system, but still I think there's room for us to improve, right?
Yes.
Rather than being exam centric, we should be more knowledge centric.
Yes, definitely, and certainly the reflection back. I mean, in the longer term, I think we have to address other things within the system itself. Any other? Yes. Because we are crossing on I think 80 minutes now, and we probably have finished in the next 5 minutes. Any quick questions from anyone in the audience? Dr. Rasika, I think you had raised your hand earlier. I wonder whether. Right, Rasika.
Yes. So thank you for this, the important messages. And one of the things I have to ask that when a student, like let's say that he doesn't have a good GPA and he wants to showcase that, and probably like like there are different types of students. Some students are like really do the coding part and everything, they do that, but they have a lack of communication skills, or they are shy to communicate. And some students have failed this, like don't have that good GPA, but they are good programmers. So how do you look at these students when they are coming to for internships or when you are recruiting them?
Very good question, Razikam. Like, it's a practical problem we always face. Sometimes there are like very good students, but they can't even tell what they know. So the communication skills is important, right? Like, it's a full package we are looking for. Like, when from the industry perspective, we need a full package. Sometimes you might be the batch top or the first in your batch and like first grade, first class and everything. But if you can't communicate, if you don't have the soft skills, if you can't work as a team, then you will not succeed in the industry, right? But on the other hand, we have seen like people with average GPA, average knowledge, but very good communication skills. They know how to work with people. So they are succeeding in the industry much better than the ones with the higher GPA. So it's a mixture. I think it's a personality thing as well. So we have to have these skills also developed, if possible, during the university days, at least if we can. Like, you have to start again from the school level, but these skills do matter for the industry.
Yeah, I too agree. And to a great extent, if you really cannot explain what you know, it is very difficult for us to figure out
Exactly.
who you are. So communication skills and also interpersonal relationship building, those things, those are skills actually. They can be taught. I have seen certain programs that really helps students, and even I have gone through many during my career, because I wasn't a public speaker like this. I was a person who really wished to read and do things myself, and the complete changeover from that particular person who has been a good coder, good engineer, to a person who can lead a team. And that really happened through certain trainings that I had from this large, big company, Motorola. So it can be done. It is, there are programs. I have not really seen universities implementing it. And even in Sri Lanka, I have seen good trainers who can really facilitate those type of things. And I remember sometime back, government also started through the military training facilities. I don't know whether it is still there. Some preparationary like course before you get into the university. You have to go through these team building activities and all, which really should help. I know there were negative and positive feedbacks on those. We have to fix the problems that we create when you are going there, because it really shouldn't put all the students into this high stress environments and all, because we are not really training them for military and all. But the problems we have to solve. But those programs definitely help. These outbound trainings, those things definitely help. And if universities really can support students to build those skills before they come into the industry, that is going to be very helpful. And I would really extend my support. Even in my team in Zone, I have one good trainer who do public speaking. If needed, we can definitely get his support. And actually, I myself have gone through this person's training. He's a young kid, very helpful. And also, there are certain things, like there are students who are struggling with their own mindset, struggling to overcome their fears, struggling to overcome their beliefs, like I'm right always. Those type of beliefs, they become toxic members of a team when they come to teamwork, right? So those can be molded. We cannot really erase those beliefs, but that can be molded to a very useful aspects of their life. These people who believe that I'm always right, they become good leaders at the end. But they find tough time to blend it with people and get their ideas up, right? So those things, it's a known science. Meditation, there are so many ways to do it, but I don't really see at university level any emphasis being given. So something to think. They are very important. And students, when they are coming in, they don't really define themselves. They have not really figured out who they are. we can mold them. We can mold them to better students, better citizens. And there are well-identified mechanisms, ways that companies as organizations we have tried out and been successful. We can definitely extend that support to the universities given an opportunity.
Right. Thank you, Vipula. So the one thought which just rings a bell when I hear what you just mentioned is that from an academic perspective, we should train for attitudes and then let the organizations train the skills at a certain level. In other words, from a hiring perspective, organizations hire for attitude and then they train for the necessary skill that they wish.
Yeah.
So that's I think a possibility, and certainly there is more importance considered today on the soft skills, as you mentioned. There's a long way to go as well, but there are initiatives like this outbound training which are happening. But I think maybe more emphasis on that to provide a more holistic sort of graduate, to develop a more holistic graduate who is capable of not just regurgitating knowledge or to look at just repeating or rewriting the same skills that they've been trained on, is certainly what we as academia should also be aspiring to. I think there's one. So we're almost coming 19 minutes. It's time to close, but I'll
very
just
very quick one.
Yes,
for
yes.
Sadiq. And so I think both of you are like good managers, and I think like one of the problems I encountered this recent is that students complain that it is very difficult to get things done from others, like a group work, like so lack of group work. So is it like how do you look at this problem? It's a common problem in the industry, or like when you see the Indians and Sri Lankans, like I can see that they far difference. But how do you look at it, and how can we fix that problem?
I think I'll just add to that. One of the thoughts that I've also heard is when it comes to final year projects, whether group projects allow free riders to roam in, and then maybe that's a thought that sometimes rings.
Yeah, but no, I think I start with that. So group projects, I think I'm in favor of doing group projects rather than individual projects, because in the real life, that's what you do, right? Like in the organization, you are not working by yourself. You have to work as a team. So you rather learn it at the university itself, right? Because there are free riders, even in our organizations, there are free riders, right? So sometimes you have to, that's the reality, right? You have to work with everyone you have, because you don't have the luxury of choosing your team sometimes. Like you have to work with what you get, right? And even like for us, when we are recruiting, sometimes we have to just recruit for who is there, because like especially these days there's a huge resource crunch, right? We don't have that luxury of choosing the best person out there, right? Sometimes we have to just get whoever is there and train them, right? So with that, there would be free riders. So I think that is again a skill you have to learn. You have to learn to live with them, and also it's a people skill where you somehow get people to do what you need to do. I'm like what Rasika asked. Yeah, so if there are 5 people in the team, one person might not be doing something. So then again, I'm like, naturally there would be a leader as well, right, in the team. So he's the one who has to somehow coordinate with these others and get it done, because like person to person, it's different. I'm like, that's something the students have to learn. I'm like, you are not working with computers, because computers, when you press a button, it always does the same thing. But a person, the same button when you press on a different day, he might react in a different way. People, right? So that's again a skill, which is a very important skill. I think people need to have, working with people, and a very difficult skill to have as well. Challenging one.
Yeah. So, and I just want to remind one thing. I think this was said by Bill Gates some time back. As I remember, one of the senior leaders from a reputed, I think it's Bill Gates. He said, if you have a difficult problem, he always give it to the laziest person in the team, because he finds a shortcut. He do it fast, he finds a shortcut, right? Yes. So being lazy is a skill, because it gives a different perspective. Do it the right way or do it the easy way, right? Every person has its own thing, and I also prefer group projects over individual projects. Individual projects could be good if he is like striving for an academic career long term, to become a PhD and all, and push the boundaries of the human knowledge beyond what we have today, then definitely individual projects, we shouldn't really discourage individual projects, but from the industry perspective, I think group projects are more preferred because they develop a lot of different skills rather than just coding. And want to remind again and again, we are not really looking for programmers. We are looking for people. Okay, programming is just one skill set. So don't ever teach programming in the university. No teaching of languages in the university, because there are so many languages in the industry. You cannot ever finish teaching all these things. There may be one particular language that has a higher demand today. I remember when I was coming out, I think Symbian was very famous, Nokia, and you could really get double the salary if you know how to write on Symbian applications. Now, 3 years of probably 10 years down, you don't really find that operating system at all. It's just a spike that had happened. There was a time where Java was very popular. Now Android is moving to Kotlin. So that Java hype, I mean, the mobile edition, it will be gone. It's a trend that was like very temporary. So at university level, we should be basically focusing on try to find a good programming language where you can teach the concepts. If it is object-oriented, I think still Java is very good. But for programming concepts, general programming concepts for embedded and all, concepts are very well taught. I think the easiest one is Pascal. Pascal is the best language if you really want to talk. I have not learned many languages, but for me to like learn a language, I just need 2 days because we know the concepts. Okay, so try to give the concepts. Don't ever push the students to learn tools, because like if you are training a carpenter, you are not training for a person to use the hammer, not to use the plier, right? You are basically building a carpenter. So that is how university has to look at the students. And let's make sure that this happens, right? If there's anything that is needed from industry, like this is a very closed, small forum. I see only 8 members. So basically 6 members, apart from myself and Dylan. Any further discussion that is needed, there may be people who can give a better perspective than myself and Dylan. Okay, Dylan is mostly coming from large software. I'm coming from electronics and embedded. So we have a little bit of different ideas, and I'm mostly coming from an organization with strive on innovation and all. So you probably have got mix of ideas, but reach out to the industry. So the forum that we are talking is, I think you can get our contacts through Rasika. Lasit, I think we are all in the same age group. Lasit, myself, Dylan, we knew each other a long time back, right? So you can reach out to us, find the phone numbers, put a WhatsApp message. Daytimes generally we are busy. Give a call in the night. We can definitely support and reach out to our HR teams, because our HR teams, we have learning and development specialist teams, and when a university reach out to them, they tried their max to help out. So the industry collaboration is very much needed. I think for universities, the target is to not to support the industry. You need to make sure that the university ranking goes up, that we create world best ranked universities inside Sri Lanka. So look at what other the ranking systems that you have in the world. Really look at universities, how they rank a university. So try to be a great university. Then students who are coming out from these great universities are going to be employable and they're going to be great. So look at those perspectives, and that will create a good ecosystem that gives out the suitable students. Don't worry about students failing interviews. It's not basically the university. So make sure that they get the right skill set to survive. Some students may fail, like some companies may fail because they are not the right fit. Not because that they didn't know particular technology that was not taught in the university. So don't get driven by those things. Set the basics into their heads and reach out to us, and at any level we are ready to help.
Okay.
Thank you, Vipula, and I think we're almost coming up to the 8:40, which is like we've been 1 hour and almost 40 minutes. So I think it's time to wrap up. So today's session, and under the topic of industry expectations of undergraduate projects, we'll be discussing all across from the idea generation in terms of project initiation to how they develop and how the industry can be involved. We talked about the measurements in terms of evaluations, how project successes, what it can lead to, and also beyond the project, how this can contribute, how they can contribute. So I would like to thank our resource person today from the industry who brought their valuable insights to this evening, Mr. Dhiran Rajapaksa, Managing Director of Vital Hub Innovations Lab and Board Director at SLASCOM, and Mr. Vipula Liyanaj, General Manager at Zone 24/7. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today and sharing your insights. So this session is organized by SLAS, the Sri Lanka Academic Association for Advancement of Science, Section E3, headed by Dr. Asika Jayaratne, and everyone joining us today and who joined us to listen to these insights as well as your own questions. We thank all of you for being part of this session today, and we will definitely share the contacts should you need to contact our resource persons looking and who are willing to extend an arm to help projects succeed and to develop them to the next level. I would like to then conclude this session today, and thank you everyone for joining for the success of the session. Have a pleasant evening, everyone.
Thanks all
Good
for joining, and
Take care, everyone.
have a great weekend.
Thank you, Dhiran, and thank you, Vipula.
Bye, everyone.